Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Worship God, the Gospel Coalition Canada's podcast to equip worship leaders, worship pastors, those working worship ministry, and just by extension, anybody who loves Jesus and loves to worship. We're here for all of you. Thanks for being with us again today. I'm Jody Cross, and I'm the lead pastor at South Shore Bible Church in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. With me from Aurelia, Canada, is Rob Brockman. Rob's the associate pastor at Cornerstone Baptist. And all the way in the west coast of Canada, Mr. Pat Sabel, who's the worship pastor at Midtown Church in Vancouver. Hello, guys. Good to see you once again.
Hey, Jody.
Jody.
Well, we have lots of fun and interesting guests. And today, everybody, I want to introduce you to Jerry Heinold, and he is from a place called Katy, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. Jerry, it's really good, and we're so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be here.
Yeah. You are the first person from Texas, so we're expecting this to be big.
Awesome. Wow. a lot of...
no pressure.
Yeah,
no
a lot
pressure.
of pressure there, so we'll see.
So, it's interesting how we get guests, and Jerry, we had a connection because somebody who was watching our podcast, who's a Canadian, is connected to your church down in Texas. I think that's a parent whose son or daughter is involved with the program that we're going to be talking about today at Grace Fellowship, where you serve in the worship ministry. And so we contacted Jerry and had a little chat about what was going on, and we were really encouraged and convicted about the whole issue of investing in and training up young people for worship ministry. So helping them to become worshipers, helping them to develop as musicians. And that's something that we on this podcast are really passionate about. I'm personally passionate about it. I know the other guys are too. And I'm currently, Jerry, looking very much forward to hearing what you're doing, because I'm embarking on this very thing in a new church that I'm in with a number of students. Like as we speak, I've got a guitar lesson in 2 hours for a 15-year-old. So I'm doing it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you're saying. So Jerry, first of all, as we start off, tell us about yourself, and then tell us about the program at Grace Fellowship Church that you're doing with youth.
Sure. Yeah. My title is Student Worship Director, and I've been here since 2005 as really just a member of the church and a volunteer who early on when I came in, somebody said, "Hey, you like students and you like worship, why don't you come and hang out with us as we have our rehearsals with our student worship bands?" And so literally I have been there every Saturday since and Sunday since. And then in 2011, they hired me to actually do this full time. And so I've been doing that. Married to an awesome woman of God, Jenny, and we have two awesome kids that are getting older now. Somehow that happens. You blink a couple of times. I have a daughter, Mariah, who actually just graduated from college, and a son who's in the middle of college, a sophomore, Mariah and Micah. And so family is a blessing. And here at Grace Fellowship, it's amazing what we have here. It's very unique as far as our student worship ministry goes. As I go around and talk to different churches and get to hear about different things that are going on, it's very rare that I find something kind of like this. And I didn't start it. Honestly, it's like 100% God started before I got here. Just some students that wanted to jump in and start helping to lead worship. And that, the couple of students that did that literally started a movement that today is 45 students, each year about 45 students we have 4 different student worship bands that lead worship for 3 different student worship services every Sunday. And it is an amazing movement. To get to see what God does to grow the passion for Himself and for worship, and for each other. And I can go on and on about just how amazing what God's doing and what He's done over the years, and just for me to jump in and be a part of it and take it through since 2011, getting to lead the team of volunteers, parents, adults that kind of help lead and mentor these students is amazing. We have a developmental program, which is basically it's not just, hey, we need somebody to lead worship, so yeah, you guys know how to play guitars and pianos and stuff. Why don't y'all do it? It's so much more than that, and that's why I'm excited to get to kind of share that with you guys. And but first and foremost, I want to always say that God built it, and we just, me and the adults, the volunteers, we get to just kind of just see it through and help kind of usher what God's doing. So it's a really cool opportunity to be there.
Jerry, I was thinking, I don't know, it was a couple months back where I spent about an hour on the phone with you and first time met you on the phone, and just hearing what the Lord is doing down there, I left that conversation convicted. I think first and foremost of my lack of sometimes thinking about, it's always the big band and it's the Sunday gathering. Right. And often it's there's not a lot of emphasis or moments put on there. And I was reminded of Psalm 78 that speaks of one generation telling the next about the greatness of the Lord. And like practically, I think that's what you guys are doing down there. But could you walk us through a bit of like, when we talk about that, telling the next generation about the greatness of the Lord, there's a desire that you have that these younger people who have musical gifting or, how are you guys going about that? Sure. To say, hey, we're going to raise these guys up and we're going to take others in our church that have already gone before and invest in this next generation. Just tell us a bit about the program.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my passion, it stemmed out of honestly being mentored and given the opportunity as a young person in high school to get to not only learn and grow and be mentored, but then to actually step up and lead. And that's my passion, is to help the next generation step up and then let them step up. And I think that's a lot of times we can easily want to train and teach, and we just like always stay under me, there's, and this is nothing wrong with this, and that's one thing, but just what I like, what I see working for us here is I'm not on stage, like I'm not leading worship every Sunday. The students are, and there are times when we'll get up there on stage with them and play, but like literally 95% of the time, it is students leading worship for other students and for the adults that are in the room as well. And so I love to get to see that, and what comes out of that, the growth that we see in that is literally amazing. And so sometimes it's hard to step back. Really, just us adults, we want to make sure that it's perfect and make sure that all the chords are hit. Make sure that the flow is all that good, and all that stuff is important. And we want to teach them that. We want to teach them to get there. But it's a little messy. It's not always perfect. There's things that happen and stuff. But I find that in the challenging times, in the times where they do make mistakes, whatever, having that happen underneath mentoring relationships, they grow more than they would if we just always did it for them. We never let them fall, never let them make mistakes. And so sometimes us coaches, we're sitting, behind the sound booth, they're doing something and the students are doing their thing, whatever, and something goes wrong. And we don't typically just automatically run up there on stage and like, oh, no, we got to fix that. Sometimes we kind of just, all right, let's see what they do. Let's see what happens. How do they grow through this? And to see, some of those students step up and be like, hey, what about this? We could do this instead. That it wasn't working, whatever. They grow more whenever we allow that. And then there are times, obviously, when something goes wrong, and sometimes it's not about music, it could be a personal conflict or whatever, and we'll step in and go like, hey, what went well there? What didn't go well there? What did you learn? And then we'll have that opportunity. That's kind of the mentoring and stepping in to kind of help. So the next time this happens, hey, here's something that God showed me in my life. And so it's more of walking alongside of them, not dragging them along the way. And I think that's one of the things we've learned a lot. Teaching them about worship is super important, and we do a lot of that. Obviously, we're created to worship, and so that's a huge part of what we do. And I could talk about that for a long time. But the funny part, I think, about what we're doing here is we're we're teaching them to be leaders, and that goes even beyond on the stage. It goes far beyond the stage. It really talks about what they're doing in all of their life. What has God created in you? And each student brings a different aspect to that. Not all of them are going to walk out of here as graduating high school and go off and be, the next Chris Tomlin or something. They're not, and we don't have that expectation. We want them to be some of the best church members, worship band members, a team at their work somewhere, and the skills and the abilities that they've learned here to walk with Christ in a daily life, to interact with people, to be on a team, to consider others better themselves, to make allowance for one another's faults, all those things that they're learning. Some of that has to do with music and some of it doesn't. And we really feel like it's more than just we're raising up worship leaders. We're raising up people that will live a lifestyle of worship. And so that's super important to us, and how we do that. Everything is kind of geared towards that. So
I think this kind of conversation around discipleship and worship is pretty key. I grew up, we talked about on episode 25, advice for aging worship leaders. I talked about how I didn't grow up with a worship pastor. I didn't grow up with any kind of intentional discipleship in the worship realm. And to me, it was reading books and like DVD series and stuff like this. But, one of the key things for the future of worship ministry, especially, we're speaking primarily to Canadians. And I think a lot of us as kind of guys, we're getting older in the tooth, and I'm still kind of young in the tooth, but we often talk about how, man, there's not a lot of up and coming worship leaders in Canada. And, we want to know, how do we get better at discipling and raising up this next generation of worship leaders that I never had when I was younger. So what would you say are the key things that you're trying to instill in these young leaders? Like, you got a bunch of young people, and maybe, and in our podcast, you're speaking to a worship leader in a church who's got a couple, maybe one or two young people beneath them. What are kind of the key things that they should be focusing on as they try to instill character stuff, value stuff into these leaders? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so honestly, the most important thing is to realize that they have been called. I feel like a lot of students today, and even maybe some of us adults, kind of, we've got the mantle, and so we take it and we want to kind of build up our own little kingdom. And students and honestly people in general think, that's the pastor's job to do that, or that's the youth pastor's job to reach other students, to lead the messages and to do all that stuff, or that's the worship leader's part to lead worship or whatever. And it can easily get to where the students think in their mind, later on in life, I want to be that. And I want to say, hey, if God's called you to do that later on in life, guess what? He's called you to do that now. And now's the time to start that. I think of 1 Timothy 4:12. One of our bands, each band gets to name themselves. And one of our bands named themselves 412, the 412 band. And it's after this scripture, 1 Timothy 4:12. And it says, don't let anyone look down on you because of your youth, but instead it's an example for believers in speech and conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. And I just love that part about, hey, don't look down on yourself, and don't let anybody else look down on you just because you're young. Now is the time for you to step up and lead your generation. So many people are leading in the wrong direction, and we can easily just watch that happen, thinking we don't have the power to do that. And so what we're constantly trying to do is find the strengths in these students, find how God's called them, because they're all different. God's created us differently. And so instead of plugging them into our little, this is what we want it to look like, instead we ask them, and we ask ourselves and we pray for them about how has God specifically called these students. So even though they're in a worship band, some of them might have a strength that's not necessarily singing. It could be, man, they're such an encourager. And so we have some students that, wow, it just blows me away just how encouraging they are. It's like they're always telling their peers and even telling us coaches, the great things that they see in us, and it's just inspiring. And so we pour that into them with, hey, did you realize that that's not usual? Like God's gifted you special. You have just this heart for encouraging people, and you see the great things in people, and then you tell them, and man, God's got that special for you, and so use that. And so we'll encourage them to find how they can continue to use that. Sometimes they don't even recognize what some of their strengths are, and so it's really cool to see them blossom in those strengths. And so, of course, some of them, they have a more of a strength of leading a team, and so as we develop them throughout the years, it's one of the cool things we do is seeing who those leaders might be someday. And so in the younger bands, as I talked about kind of how we do a developmental process with them, is we're looking for those strengths when they're younger, and as through the years, we're telling them about those strengths that we see. We're also encouraging their weaker areas, and we want to grow those weak areas. But as we're looking for who might someday end up being a leader of a team. And so, because once they get to be older, juniors or seniors in high school, we actually, through the years, are giving away responsibilities. Oh, hey, why don't you put the set together this week? Oh, hey, why don't you bring the Bible study for this week? Hey, why don't you, put together this social event that we're doing this week? How about you pray for this week, or you do the transition for, and we're just encouraging them, finding out where they are. And then for those students that someday they're like, I really see a calling to actually be a worship leader potentially for this student, they will be the leader of the team whenever they get to be the older team. And so that's that developmental process that really gives them those opportunities. And then other students, we might put them in different roles. We might have a band leader if a student has particularly strength for hearing all the different parts of the band and what they should be doing. And so sometimes our worship leader might not have that specific skill. And so we're really looking for those strengths, ushering those in, encouraging them to use that, and then giving them the opportunity to lead out in those types of things. So that's a couple of things that we see, just allowing us to see what God's doing in them, and then breathing into that, encouraging them in that, and then letting them go in that way. So it's really cool to see how the students respond whenever you give them those opportunities.
That's amazing. I heard, as you're talking, I'm just hearing that you as a cheerleader, just believing in them. And if you have kids at home that are teenagers, or if you remember that you were a teenager, you just need a lot of affirmation and encouragement, because you think, I can't walk straight, I can't do anything, I'm not great at guitar, I don't sing very well. And as you said, someone just coming alongside and saying, no, you are gifted, God has blessed you, don't be afraid. Those are all really important things. Jerry, I was going to ask you, let's do some little short answer questions here. I'm going to give you some popcorn ones, all right? Because I'm curious about these things. So tell me about one sentence or less. Age in and age out. How old in and how old out?
Yeah, so they can actually audition. We do have auditions whenever they are in the 6th grade for starting in the band in the 7th grade. And then whenever they're seniors in high school, I don't know how y'all do school in Canada, but we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is junior high, and then 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th is high school. And so when they're about 17, 18 years old, they graduate. And so once they go off to college, they graduate out of our program as well.
Okay, good. Same with us. We're kind of the same, junior and senior high. All right. Next question. Is there a curriculum? Do you have a manual that you've created that these are the 10 lessons that you teach them through? Is there anything that's that formalized, or is it more informal?
It is a goal of ours to formalize what we have been doing for the last many, many years. And we have not done it yet. We have, I have some documents that are, whenever the first year or two of a band that comes in, I'm actually training the adults on how to lead a team like this and how to grow them, how to mentor them. And we're also training the students on how to be a team and how to do that. And so I have a document that kind of walks me through how I'm gonna, the topics that I want to hit when they first come in the door and that sort of thing. So that kind of helps. So it's not a formal, but we really do hope to. We've been talking about it for a couple of years now of how can we formalize a little bit. And I think that would help us to be able to pass that out and give it to other people as well, other churches, to be able to use, because I love that idea. But no, we haven't done it yet.
So it sounds like an apprenticeship, a lot of on-the-job training. Come and watch, come and grow.
For sure.
I was going to ask a question, just who are the mentors? Where do they come from?
Oh, great question. A lot of them are parents of students. A lot of times when they come to audition, the coaches and I are having very intentional conversations with the parents to find out, like, oh, hey, this person sings like an angel. Like, where'd they get that from? And come to find out, oh, yeah, dad sings or mom sings. And it's like, oh, okay, you like worship? Yeah. And so we'll kind of see, oh, what do you think about, having a chat with me and hearing about what we're doing here and see if you want to become a coach. We call them coaches for each band. And so that's a lot of where they come from is parents. And then also we have an amazing worship ministry at Grace Fellowship as well. So there's adults that are in the worship team that have no kids here whatsoever, or they used to have kids here, and they'll jump back in and help mentor these students. And then sometimes it's just random people that I meet in the church that I know they love worship, they love working with students, they have a passion for that. And so I'll meet with them and find out, they'll love when they hear about what's going on. So that's kind of how we get them.
Are you doing any, I guess two questions, sort of A and B. Do you do music lessons? Is this part of your training that you're teaching them as well as putting them in bands? You teaching them skills in their own particular instrument area?
Yep, so it's a great question. We do to a certain extent, but not really lessons per se. We have rehearsals, and during the rehearsals, obviously, oh, I don't know how to bar chord, or, oh, I don't know how to play, B minor, and so in that they're learning, oh, here it is, and I'll pick that up. Here you go, do that. So they're learning as they go, and they learn a lot just on the job. But we do encourage them separately to get into lessons. And so I'll give referrals, oh, you need guitar lessons here. I know this person, and some of those people are former students of ours that came through the ministry. And so we encourage that. We really can't do it during a rehearsal. Imagine, you guys, some of you are worship leaders. You might imagine having to teach a lesson while you're doing rehearsals. It's kind of hard, but so that's kind of how we work through that, encouraging them to get lessons, and they learn stuff along the way.
Oh, totally. It's good.
The music part comes more easily than some of the other stuff.
I think when I spoke to you, Jerry, a while ago, you said like one of the main kind of things that you're trying to instill in the student is living a lifestyle of worship.
Yep.
Can you speak to that for a minute? Just kind of they're coming in. There's an audition, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What does that audition look like, and what are you calling them to right at the outset?
Yeah, for sure. So we do have auditions, and they're typically 6th graders, 7th graders, sometimes 8th graders whenever they audition. So they're young, typically in their faith. And so a lot of what we see is helping them to realize what worship is. And for us, we recognize that worship is not just the music. And so a lot of our interview with them during the audition is asking about how are they leading out in their life, as far as like walking with Christ, and how does that look in their schools, and how does that look in their families, how does that look here in the church, to kind of find out. But we also recognize they're young at that age. Who they're becoming is part of, honestly, what we help them to realize. And so we're trying to see somebody who feels like they have been called to this ministry in the auditions, and that they understand the commitment, we talk about, just how the fact that they're leaders, how important their leadership is, and that sort of thing. But they honestly, they don't really get it until they're honestly like 10th or 11th grade. Right. And I've even had some students that come back from college and like, oh, okay, I got it now. And so the what you said about lifestyle worship, if students have heard it one time, they've heard it 1 billion times, because we talk about that all the time. That is the most important part of what we're doing here. And the fact, when they get into their first band, the very first rehearsal, I basically think I popped the bubble. They think that oh, this is about becoming a rock star. I'm going to be the next Chris Tomlin, or I'm going to be in a rock band or whatever. And so from on the outset, I'm just like, yeah, I'm sorry to have to tell you guys this, but this is really not about being a rock star. And it's not about, honestly, a lot of it's not even going to be about music sometimes. It's really about how are we living a lifestyle of worship. And I tell them how I want to see their life pouring into and out of the stage. Not, I had such an amazing time of leading worship today that now I'm going to go have a great week this week with Jesus. It's like, that's a backwards way of thinking. And so instead, I'm like, I want you to have such an amazing week of walking with Jesus and in the Bible that whenever you get on stage, what he told you all week long, boom, now that's being poured out into your peers from the stage. That's the right cycle of living a lifestyle of worship, most important to what you're doing out there. Because if your peers are seeing you, live like the world and be the average, teenager in the world, and then they see you up on stage, guess what? You're not leading worship. You're leading them away with your life. And amazingly enough, some of the most incredible seasons of worship that we've had are when the bands are I hate to say it, but best at walking out that life outside of church. Whenever they're actually, and you can tell when people, there's different, not all of us are, in the same place spiritually. We're all on that walk. And so as students, the most mature students who are really walking out that lifestyle worship, the students respond to that worship leading better than when they're not living that lifestyle of worship. Because they look on stage like, oh, this person is saying how good God is, and yet they're not living like God is that good. And so that I could talk about that forever, and students are probably sick of hearing me say it. But that is literally everything about what we're doing here, and that's why it's more than music. That's why it's so important for them to get that from the beginning, because I'm like, if you're only here to be a rock star, it's really not going to be that fun for you. If you're here to live a lifestyle of worship and to walk with Jesus and grow with him, man, we're going to have a blast. And the music's going to end up being amazing. And all, this team is going to end up being amazing, and you're going to love it here. But if you're not called to be here, then it's not going to be that fun. And so that's super important for us.
Jerry, one thing I'm wondering about is, I think back to when I was a young guy getting involved playing bass, on worship. And I think maybe it's a stereotype, but I think a lot of younger people, you're a little insecure. There's a little sensitivity, and hearing direction, hearing correction can be hard and discouraging at times.
For sure.
What tools do you have for, you're talking to 16, 17-year-olds, and you're kind of going, hey, you got to grow in this area. How have you learned, and what can you give advice to people in terms of directing and correcting in gospel gracious ways? How do we do that?
For sure. And I've definitely seen that a lot. I think maybe the older I get, but this young generation has a hard time receiving correction, and they do get offended very easily. They feel attacked very easily. And so it is a fine line to walk, and you really have to be gracious at how you say things, for sure. Absolutely, 100%. I would say the most important thing, and it's one of our other main things, is relationship. The coaches, as we mentor these students, we're doing life with them, and so if they didn't know how much we loved them, they wouldn't listen to us. They would hear and be offended at absolutely everything, because we didn't have a relationship with them. But because we show them that, hey, we love you, like, we're in here. They could do something terrible, and we're like, hey, it's something you did. We still love you. Let's walk through this together. And so we've had some really challenging times, honestly, with different students or with entire bands. And just the fact that the students knew, man, this person takes a lot of time. Like the volunteers who work with us, we rehearse 2.5 hours on Saturdays. And they're here for probably about an hour and a half on Sundays, almost every weekend. For 6 years of their lives. And those adults and the students are doing that as well. And so that relationship is super, super important. I can't stress that enough. building that relationship, letting the students know you love them and that you're there for them no matter what. Like they make a big mistake, that can't be, oh, we're kicking you out. Like I've literally never kicked anybody out of the band. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 something years. I've never kicked anybody out of the band. And it's not that they haven't done things that are pretty challenging. It's that we want to walk with them. I've had some hiatus situations where it's like, hey, let's take a break and let's have you meet up with a person regularly and mentor you through this and kind of get through that. And those people restored back into the band at some point. And that's been amazing to see God work even through some of those really challenging things. And so I think that's really important. One of the things we do, I think, that helps to nurture this is that once a year, we actually have an individual meeting between the coaches and a student, each student. And so we call these coaches meetings. And so in that meeting, that's whenever we are calling out to the student, like, hey, we want you to know this is what we recognize as your strengths. Hey, here's some areas where we feel like if you could really focus on growing in this, then, man, it would be great for you. It'd be great for the team, for your future. It would be amazing. And then we also get their feedback. Hey, what's going great? What do you love about this? What's not going so great? What can we do better? We recognize with the students that, hey, and I tell them all the time, like, we're not going to be perfect. As adults, we're not perfect either. And so the same amount of grace that I've received from the Lord, I want to give to you because it's been a lot. And so I think that those meetings, the students walk out of there just head high because they feel encouraged. And we just told them maybe some challenging things, but they mostly heard just how much God loves them, how much we love them, and how we see that God's using them and has a plan for them, has a purpose for them to lead out. And so I think that those things have been amazing. It's been an amazing component of what we're doing here for the correction part.
Jerry, I'm thinking this afternoon of someone who's listening and they go, yep, I'm all for that. Philosophically, theologically, that's where I want to be with our church. What are some things that you would share? I know you've had a number of things already, just in terms of even the things you've just said, but give us 2 or 3 things that would help people who are embarking, just beginning this kind of ministry. What should they be thinking? What should they be doing?
I would say start with what you have. I think it can be overwhelming to hear about, what other churches are doing, to see these massive churches that have amazing and yet some of the smaller churches that I meet with are like, oh, we don't have that. We don't have AVMs, or we don't have blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't need any of that stuff. You need who God's given you right there in front of you. And I think just start with honestly, we did not start with all, these bells and whistles and 45 students ready to go. It started with a couple of students. And honestly, it was the students who stepped up. So if there are any students that are watching this and they're like, oh man, yeah, I can play the guitar. I've always wanted to do that, but that's always been the worship leader's job, or that's been the worship pastor's job. I think that just like start with where you get whoever find somebody, get them, say, hey, would you lead a song? And maybe if you don't, there are some ministries that I've heard about. It's like they don't even do worship in their student services, and it's like, okay, well maybe you start with asking a student, hey, would you just do one song? Find a worship song and would you do that, and see how that goes, and just build from there. I promise you, as students see, oh wow, they're giving us an opportunity to step up, more and more students will come, and I think that will breed more and more of a culture of allowing students to jump in there, and you'll be amazed at how fast your ministry will grow whenever you just give them the opportunity. We used to actually allow 6th graders to audition as well, and they just had so many, and they weren't quite ready yet developmentally, and so we kind of pulled back that. But they're ready to go at 6th grade, 7th grade. That's when most of the people are jumping in here, and it's because they are ready to get involved. And so give them that opportunity. Start with what you've got. It doesn't have to be amazing. It doesn't have to be something that somebody else is doing. Just do what God's called you to do with the people that God's given you, and you'll see amazing things, I think.
I think that's just excellent advice, because I know that there's a lot of churches, smaller churches that listen in, and you're just sometimes it's the Sunday meeting for them is an acoustic guitar, maybe in a cajon or a piano, and they're just feeling sometimes like, we can never move on from this, and maybe this is all it's ever going to be. But you got a couple young people in your church, and they have gifts that maybe you're not even aware of. Crazy story in my life. I have lots of children, but when one of my sons was 16 years old, he was a skateboarder, and that's what he loved. He was a jock. And I didn't even know. One evening before dinner, he comes up and said, "Dad, I wrote a song." And I'm like, "You did what?" And he'd been literally on YouTube and learned how to play guitar. And I'd been writing songs for years in front of him. And there was just something that connected, got him, and all of a sudden he plays me this song, and I'm like, "You're kidding me. Like, where did that come from?" So I just wonder if there's not a bunch out there, those kind of kids that if we actually tap this and we said, where did that come from? And so great advice. I think this is definitely a time where we need to go back and just encouragement to anyone listening in, like, who's in your church that's, sixth grade and up, and have you even given any consideration? After talking to you about 6 weeks ago, or maybe it was, I don't know, it was a month ago, I brought 4 musicians in, and
awesome.
it was a disaster on Saturday morning. It was an absolute disaster. Sure. It was everybody said they could play, and nobody could really play, and it was like, what did I get myself into?
For sure.
I'm the adult guy. I do worship for the main thing, but it was so refreshing in another sense, and it's like, okay, let's start here. Let's build. So listening in, if you're listening, just ask the Lord who's there. Start to mingle with parents and young people, and let's find those musicians. And Jerry, I'm sure that there's you wouldn't mind at all if people are reaching out with questions that I'm sure you'd be happy to answer any of those questions for people.
For sure. Yeah, one of our hearts is to take this outside of these 4 walls, outside of our church. And so we've done some things that we call student worship band trainings in past years, where we doing sessions training the students on their instruments, but we open this up to other churches. And so we've had, probably 12 or so churches that have come and joined us, and I'll take the adults and we'll go and we'll talk about, all right, what challenges have you had? And then together, it's not just me saying, "Oh, this is what you need to do." It's like, "Hey, here's some stuff that we've done. What have you other churches have done?" And so we all kind of learn together. But there is a lot of things that we've experienced that I want to help share. Hey, we've experienced that. Here's what we did. Maybe try it, or maybe there's another way to troubleshoot what's going on. But it's I will say that, what you're saying, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy sometimes, and just be okay with that. It's going to get better. I promise it will get better, but it's okay if there's wrong notes or there's some conflict sometimes. Some of those things they learn, they grow through that. So,
Jerry, quick question, and there's a two-sider to this question. A, what is the most challenging thing about this kind of ministry? And then B, how has the Lord grown you through this ministry?
Oh, good questions. I would say the most challenging for me personally is the conflict. Because the truth is, the closer you get to anybody, the more conflict you're going to have, because you get to know their flaws more often. And so I am created to hate conflict. I think God created me to run from conflict. Not really, but I just have always hated conflict. And so one of the things that I've had to overcome is that God wants me to not run from it, to dive honestly into it. And so through the years, when we have had the biggest challenging situations of personal conflict, we've just grabbed those students and say, hey, let's come together and let's talk through it. And on the other side of that, the students have grown more than the best worship set they ever put together. And it's crazy to say that, but some of our biggest personal conflicts have ended up being some of the biggest growth areas that we've seen for these students. And some of these students that I've seen go off to college, become adults, get married or whatever, they're the ones that have actually taken the personal, the biblical conflict resolution stuff that we've kind of tried to instill in them, are some of the ones that I think are doing the best relational ministries and the best marriages and the best, they've took it to heart, like just, hey, I feel I love somebody else. That should be willing to overlook some of the issues. But I should also, if I love somebody enough, I should be willing to step into that to grow that relationship. So funny enough, worship ministry is more about personal relationships and growing, treating other people like Christ treats us, instead of just about the music part of it. But that's a huge part. And so that's how I've grown in that, is just, learning to, not only for myself, but for the students. So literally at a young age and all through the years, we're constantly talking, in addition to the lifestyle of worship, we're talking about biblical conflict resolution, because it's going to happen. And so that's, believe it or not, it's a huge part of, I think, the success of what we're seeing here, is students not being afraid of going to somebody and say, hey, when you did that hurt my feelings, but because I love you, I'm thinking the best. Like, I know you probably didn't mean it. And it's crazy how just like a statement like that can be like unifying. I think the church is so disunified a lot because we don't see eye to eye. And instead of saying, hey, it's okay that we don't see eye to eye, saying, hey, I love you enough we can talk about these things and, hurt each other's feelings, say I'm sorry for that, and keep walking together in unity. So that's a whole nother topic, but it's a huge part of it.
Jerry, so much to think about, and so inspiring. Pat and I are parents and of kids who have kind of come through those years, and I've got 4 that are musical and had lots of investment. And thank you for all the 45 students that you're investing in, and all those who have come through your program. And God bless the ones who are yet to come. And for those of you who are watching, as you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in your church that you think, I need to start doing that, God bless you too, investing in those 13, 14-year-olds and seeing where they will go. I know where they're going to go. The church that I was at had 3 generations of worship leaders, older training into younger, and that younger grew up and invested in the younger, and we saw 3 or 4 generations within about 5 or 6 years. And as you're talking, I was just thinking, we haven't used the word discipleship, but really what you're saying is you're discipling people in Christ. Yeah. The musical aspect and the musical outlet of their faith and their walk and their worship, that's kind of where it's hitting the road. But the reality is you're just telling people how to walk with Jesus and walk as believers with each other. So Paul says to Timothy, and you referred to that 1 Timothy 4:12 verse earlier, so being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, in this case we would say the gospel and musical things and leadership, but our own selves, because you had become so dear to us. And Jerry, it's really apparent listening to you that you love these students, and your mentors, coaches, they love these students and they are dear to you. And so that's the heart behind it. And Jerry, I just want to thank you for being with us today and for sharing. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, would you like to give out your email address or a website that we can have people contact you? What is it? Sure thing. Our church's website is whatisgrace.org, and you can see a little bit more about our student worship ministry and our whole church, but our student worship ministry on that as well. But they can reach out to me with my email is jheinold@whatisgrace.org. Fantastic. Well, Jerry, thank you so much. Pat and Rob, thanks, guys, for being with us. And here's to the next generation and the blessing that God gives us to invest in younger leaders. So thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll hope to see you again next time. God bless you in your worship and the leadership that the Lord gives you. Have a great day. See you next time.